This lecture is about the marketing environment. Specifically, we're going to talk about these environmental factors that affect marketing, and they're divided into two groups, the microenvironment and the macroenvironment. And under the macroenvironment, we're going to talk about sort of the demographic and economic environmental factors, the natural and the technology, and political and cultural, and a little bit of understanding how companies need to react to these when they do their market planning. Now, as I said in an earlier lecture, the marketing managers, marketing has the responsibility to be the ears and eyes, to be the senses of the organization. They need to know what's going out there and what opportunities and threats may be present that may affect the business, and they also need to be able to communicate to the customers and various other stakeholders in the organization. So you've constantly got to be tuned into what's happening out in the world. And so for marketers, they make a real sort of conscious practice to be reading the newspaper, looking at magazines, looking at television, radio reports, and talking to people, and constantly sort of gathering information, gathering intelligence about what's happening out there in the market, because there are many different factors that can affect the marketing operations. So let's sort of look at sort of two groups of factors. The first are called the microenvironmental forces or factors. They're close to the company. They sort of directly interact with the company. And so they would be the organization itself, suppliers, intermediaries, and competitors. And then what we have is the macro environment, which are sort of larger social factors that affect everybody in the microenvironment. So for example, if I can look at suppliers, suppliers will directly affect the organization and only affect it, so it's a microenvironmental factor. But a macroenvironmental factor like changes in demographics affect everybody in the microenvironment. Suppliers, the organization, competitors, they affect everybody. So one's on a sort of very small sort of corporate scale, and the other is on a very sort of macro or large societal scale. So let's take a closer look at the microenvironment and look at some of how these factors might affect might affect the organization and what marketing managers need to think about. So because marketing and the decisions in marketing affect all sorts of other areas, they might affect human resources and hiring. They might affect production in terms of the products that need to be made, the amount of money that needs to be spent. Marketing in the beginning and planning stages sort of has to be aware of what resources are available to the organization, what are the core competencies, in other words, what things does the organization do really well, what capabilities do they have. And so marketers need to monitor what's going on within the company itself in order to sort of look at how they're going to make their decisions. They also look at their suppliers, because the suppliers are providing the raw materials and services that their company needs to work with and needs to be able to have as a secure supply. And so they're looking at relationships with suppliers, whether the supply is of good quality, is there continuity. And so if you've got great ideas coming from your suppliers, that may impact in terms of your market planning. If your supplier has a new piece of technology and a new capability, that may allow you to develop a new product that better satisfies your customers. So you need to know what's going on with your suppliers. The same thing with your intermediaries, those organizations that will sell your product perhaps to your final customers. And knowing what they're doing and how they move product will make a huge impact. If they're opening up new stores or they've got new capabilities, you need to know that that's going on. If perhaps they're now carrying a competitive product, that may influence your decision and what you do. So it's important to be able to understand the intermediaries that really represent you or stand between you and your customers. If there's a problem there, your product is not going to get to the customers. Now, most companies look at not just sort of suppliers and intermediaries separate, but in fact they look at them as a whole channel of distribution. And they call this supply chain management, where they're managing the flow of products from suppliers right through to customers. And so for many companies, they have these channels of distribution set up that almost become sort of competitive advantages. If they're set up properly and really functioning well and better than other companies, then they become more efficient, more cost savings, and get the product out to customers, which better satisfies them. So you need to be able to monitor all the elements and manage the elements in your supply chain. And finally, the last element in the microenvironment are competitors themselves, understanding what's going on. And what I would ask you to do is stop the tape here and think for a couple of minutes about how you might gather information from competitors. Okay. So what did you come up with? Well, I mean, there's some very easy ways of doing it. You can phone a competitor. You can buy a competitor's product and take it apart. That's called reverse engineering. There's been lots of companies and countries that have done that. You can take a plant tour. You can get information from them on the internet. All those are sort of good ways of getting information from competitors. There's also, magazine articles and television shows about competing products. You run into sort of shaky ground when you start thinking about going through competitors' garbage or sort of wiretapping or something like that, although it does happen with some companies. And then you're starting to not only be sort of unethical in your behaviors, but also illegal in your behaviors. Many companies designate individuals within that company to be responsible for gathering information about certain competitors. And that information is sort of constantly processed within the organization, so they know exactly what's going on. Now let's turn to the macro environment, and these are demographic, economic, political and legal, social, natural, and technological forces. And I want to start by talking about sort of changes in demographics. And as you can see, these are macro factors. These forces affect almost all companies operating in a particular industry. And demography is a study of human populations using statistics. So we'll talk about various demographic variables like age and gender and race and occupation, immigration levels, family size, that sort of thing. And because markets are made up of people, it's important that marketers understand what's happening with demographics. How are the markets changing? How are the characteristics changing? So let's look at a very simple example, and we'll look at the North American population, and we'll look at the distribution of age. Okay? This is a graph showing the distribution of age in North America, and it's pretty much the same in Canada, the United States. And what you'll notice is that there are a couple of big groupings of people. The first are those between 37 and 55, which are the baby boomers, and then a small little generation that follows after them called Generation X, and then another one called Generation Y. And so what may become very obvious is these are very large groups of customers that have sort of a lot of spending power, and so you need to think about sort of exactly what are these customers and how can I satisfy them. So let's begin to take a little closer look at them. So baby boomers. I think most of you are probably familiar with baby boomers. Born after the Second World War between 1947 and 64. There are sort of about 10 million baby boomers, and they make up about 33% of the Canadian population. So why do we have baby boomers? Well, first of all, when the soldiers came home after World War II, a lot of families had been delayed. The men were off fighting, and women were working at home. And so there was a lot of people that had delayed getting married and having families now starting to do so, and all at one time. There was a lot of prosperity after the Second World War. The economy was going very well, and so that a lot of families were feeling comfortable that they could have children. And then what happened in the mid-60s is the birth rate fell off because of the pill. Women started to enter the workforce, and so the population fell off. But for this very short period of time, we have a large number of children being born, and those are the baby boomers.